Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Technique Tuesday. My name is Ali Board, and if you are watching this on the 1st of November at 9 a.m., then I am broadcasting live from my studio down here in an incredibly wet, blustery, soggy Dorset on the south coast of the UK. We had a huge storm last night. Garden is everywhere, the chickens are all akimbo, but I'll sort that out later. It's lovely to have you all here. Now, you might be watching on Catch Up, you might be watching via Facebook or some of my other social media platforms. No matter how you're watching, you're very welcome indeed. It's lovely to have you here. But if you are watching live on Facebook, one of the first things I like to do for Technique Tuesday is to give a shout out to those people who have made a comment, because it's very kind of you to take the time to tune in. First comment of the day goes to Angie. Good morning, lovely. She's saying good morning to everybody. And yes, Barbara is saying morning from a wet and blustery Dorset. Who else can I say hello to this morning? Cheryl and Val. Yes, we've survived the storm unscathed. I think things might need reassigning in the garden, shall we say. Linda P, Kirsty, good morning. Sheena, Rosemary, Christine. Looks like it's wild, wet and windy in Cornwall as well. Joe T, Mick, good morning, lovely. Good morning, Anita. Rosemary, now who's saying, Linda P is saying she slept through the storm. Good for you. I wish it had been the same in this neck of the woods. Rosie with a brand new knee in France. Hello you. Trisha, Leslie, Teresa, Anne B, and Hilary P as well. Thank you all very much for commenting and tuning in. You don't have to comment, but it's always nice to say hello to you and to know where you are in the world. Good morning, Kim. I am going to be doing a demonstration this morning. We've started this project a couple of weeks ago, an autumn leaf project, very apt for this time of year, and we looked at how we could draw it out. We looked at a little bit of technology in terms of how we might be able to alter our drawings, how we might be able to print the drawings out. All of that information is available on my blog. That's the Technique Tuesday blog via the Learning to Paint website. So that's www.learningtopaint.co.uk. So if you're not sure where I am in the midst of this project, do feel free. Don't go anywhere yet. Watch today's, but if you want to backfill the information, then you can go over there. So Mick, our resident poet, has put, what's he put for today? Each autumn leaf is brushed with colour from nature's wondrous palette. If only we artists could match her tones of yellow, gold and scarlet. Mick, that's beautiful. Thank you very much. Who else have we got in the room? Jane. Anne is saying that she's liking the idea of the image of my chickens akimbo. All of that kind of thing. Good morning, Hazel. I'm sorry to hear that you're poorly. Trudy, good morning. Patricia is saying, phew, made it. And Ali D had, oh gosh, you've all been in the wars recently. Ali, I hope you get well soon. And Marion saying, stormy in Suffolk. We're either suffering from health-related things, or we're suffering from the storms outside. So let me alleviate all of that. Good morning, Jilly. Shall we go to the overhead camera and I will fill you in on where we are with the project, and we'll do a little bit more to it, shall we? So let's go to that overhead camera. Oh, even my drawing board is akimbo this morning as well. Everything is akimbo. So here we have the line. Good morning, Martina. Good I was say good drawing. That was a cross between good morning and here's my drawing. This was the drawing, well actually that was the drawing that I did originally, where I took some actual leaves and I did a tracing of them. We looked at scanning that tracing into the computer so that we had a digital version of it. Good morning, Jean. Hello, lovely. And then I looked at reducing it in size, but I decided that I didn't like that. So I drew it out onto my Milford watercolour paper, which I think you can just about see in the camera. I've got the lights all turned up to max because it's so dark in the studio today, but you can just see that there. And then this is what we did last week, which I know you can see. And this was the start of our colour experiments. So we were experimenting with some of the stuff that I've got over here. So I've got a combination of watercolours and the Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay inks. If you want to learn more about those two things, pop back to last week's blog post where there's a copy of the live broadcast. You will see the links to this equipment and you will hear me talk about it more. Good morning, Julie. Please don't apologise for being late, Julie. You are, after all, the other side of the planet from me. So we were looking at, you can see I annotated here, because even though this was a week ago, I still had to remind myself of what it was that we did and what we said when I did my prep for this yesterday. So I'm really glad that I labelled my inks. I know that I was having a bit of an issue with some of my inks going off. I haven't actually had time to replace any of those yet. Good morning, Joe. And we were looking as well at combinations of watercolour potentially and ink as well. So over here I've got my Quinacridone Gold, Daniel Smith, that watercolour, that one is. I have got the Dr. P.H. Martin's Brown in the Bombay. I've also got the Sepia, and while the little kind of dropper bottle has perished up there, I think we'll be all right with that. And we've got that amazing magenta, this colour here. So we have plenty to choose from. The other thing that I am going to throw into the mix, good morning Thea, good morning Carol, is this one. This is Daniel Smith's Green Apatite Genuine. So why have I suddenly decided to put green into the mix when we were talking about a very sort of autumnal palette last week? It's because you can't see it, but outside of this window over here is a pear tree, and I was looking at the leaves. In fact, I'm looking at them now as I talk to you. I was looking at the leaves that had fallen, and they were very, very yellow and had little dots of green in them too. So I thought I would introduce green into this mix too. So let's just show you how this green comes out. It's a very beautiful green. If you've ever attended any of my workshops, you will know of my adoration and love for this colour. Straight out of the tube, it's one of Daniel Smith's Primatech watercolours. Excuse me. It splits, it granulates, it does very, very beautiful things indeed. And it's a rather stunning green. You can get deep tones out of it like that. You can get very pale tones out of it. So I thought I would drop that into the mix too. So those are the colours that I'm going to be experimenting with. Now, Viv is saying, morning, sorry, just looked out of my window and saw my beautiful Acer tree was lying on the ground. Managed to pick it up, fingers crossed it will be okay. Oh, Viv, that's that must have been a real shock this morning. So I do hope that it survived. Morning Marion D, morning Marion B, and good morning Pam too. Now what's Marion B rating? Love this one. Autumn is a second spring when every leaf is a flower. That's beautiful, Marion. Albert Camus, I don't know how you pronounce that, but I need to look at that further. How fantastic. Aren't you all brilliant for contributing to our lovely creative well-being this morning? You know how much I love it when you're all here. So that's my little colour chart. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do with all the colours yet, but I've certainly got that there. I'm glad I did that experiment so that I can understand my colours a little better. And there's no further ado. We need to actually get to painting this in. Let me tidy up a little bit. You know me, shove things everywhere. And let's anchor this down. I've got my magnets here and my little clips so that I can get this straight and organised in the camera. Like I said, you can probably see the line drawing there, and it's kind of all ready to go. I've got various ways that I can work through this. Marion D is saying, what colour is the green, please? That was Green Apatite Genuine. It's the Daniel Smith colour. Good morning, Pam. Good morning, Maggie, as well. Now, I've got various ways that I can do this. I can kind of underpaint all three leaves and then I can go back and work them up. I could work each leaf independently. I haven't really decided what's going to happen after I've kind of laid some colour on. So I think what I'm going to do this morning, and this is me thinking out loud, because you know me, I don't tend to overthink these broadcasts. I tend to do my thinking out loud so that you can understand a little bit of my process. Just preparing my posh kitchen roll there. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this one and we'll see how we get on. But then saying that, the minute that I've said that out loud, I think I need to have some sort of idea about what colour is going where so that I can think about it. I'm desperate to start off with that red. If you tuned in last week, you'll know that I had the beautiful red leaf that I found on my walk. So I think this one will be predominantly red. Now this is a geranium leaf, and I know that I'm not really big on making everything completely perfect in terms of it has to replicate the plant exactly. I'm not painting this botanically, but I do think because that was actually the pear leaf that I traced, I think that one needs to be yellow with maybe a few little bits of green and brown. So therefore I think the base colour of this one needs to be green. So if that one's got yellow and green on it, if that one's got green and possibly a bit of brown on it, then maybe this one could have the brown, so that there's a link from one colour to the next colour to the next colour. I think that will work anyway. Let's get cracking and we'll see how we get on. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decant some of this magenta into my ceramic palette so that I can make variations of it. I can have a thin version of it and I can have a thick version of it too. I'm using a ceramic palette because these inks are waterproof when they're dry. They are a shellac based ink, and if I put them in a plastic palette, then the chances are they're either going to stain it really quite heavily, or if I forget to clean up quickly, they're going to dry in there and I'm not going to be able to actually get them back out again. So that's why ceramic palette is my palette of choice. Let's put a little bit of that sepia out as well, just in case I want to dull some of the colour down. This dropper not working well at all this morning, but I did know that. Let's make sure I put the lid on before I shove it everywhere. And then let's get cracking, shall we? We've got this one to work on first. It's a very serrated edge. I've got my very trusty SAA imitation sable brushes. This is a size 6. And now this is probably a little bit on the small side for painting this size of leaf. If I was painting them very impressionistically, then I probably wouldn't have this much drawing down. I'd probably be painting with a bigger brush. But I want these to be quite neat and tidy. I'm in my neat and tidy phase at the moment. And this one has a serrated edge. So I don't want to have anything much bigger because I want to be able to get back into those little nooks and crannies. Now, one thing I definitely want to buy myself is a little bit of time to get some variegation in my colour. Now, if I was working in watercolour, I would be able to put some colour down, add some water to blend out, and I would get a nice kind of flow from one colour to the next. But because I'm going to be using ink, this dries far faster and with much more of a tide mark than watercolour does. So I've got to be super careful. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay some water down into a sort of randomish area before I start, so that that area of my paper is damp. Then when I go back in with my colour, and let's just make sure that I've got absolute control of what's on my brush, then I'm hoping when the colour hits that little patch of water, I will get a nice diffusion, and there you go, you can see it's happening straight away, and I won't have to worry too much about getting hard edges. So that's a sort of an appropriated watercolour technique for inks, really, a bit of wet into wet going on. And then I've got a nice kind of softness coming out to it as well. So we're getting into this serration. I think I can afford to step up the strength of the colour in places so that we've got it kind of a real soft pink in some areas, and we've got a much stronger pink in areas. That's looking awesome. Let's use a little bit of water to blend that out. And talking and painting serration at the same time, quite the challenge. Right, let's go to straight over to that quinacridone gold. And let's get some of that into the mix as well, literally, as well as figuratively. Let's let it mix in with that pink so that we get an interesting orange. and we'll flow this colour. Oh, I've got this big blob of water. Here's something that you need to look out for when you're doing tidy work. Can you see I've got big drops of water on the ferrule, on the metal part of the brush? If I don't take care of those, there is a danger that they will run off into the bristles and they'll dilute my colour more than perhaps I would like them to. So it's a good idea to keep your eye on stuff like that. That's working rather well. I'm pleased with that. I think, again, we could afford to step up the strength of this colour. So let's agitate the surface of this and get a much stronger version out of it. Just in case you haven't seen me paint with watercolours before, those watercolours in the little blocks over here are tubed colour squeezed out into the block, because that is the consistency of paint that I prefer. Out of the tube, straight out of the tube, I find it a little bit on the sticky side, and in a pre-baked pan I find it a bit on the hard side. So I go for the Goldilocks principle, which is not too sticky, not too hard, just right. So I squeeze it out into the pans and then I allow it to dry, and then when I come to wet it again, it is the perfect consistency for what I want. Now that Quin Gold working brilliantly. I think I still want a little shot of either orange or pink or something else happening down here at the bottom. So let's get these last little bits in. Woo! Point of my brush working well, considering I'm yakking at the same time. Let's get some of that orangey colour up into that yellow, and then pulling it down the stem. I think I'm going to switch to, what size is this? Size 2 brush. And I'm going to pull some of that colour down into the stem. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. Look at that. Got a dot of water on that ferrule. Need to take care of that. I don't think my size 6 is going to be quite fine enough to get down that stem. So rather than tie myself up in knots trying to do that, let's do it with a much finer brush. I'm also acutely aware, just in case you ever wonder what goes on behind the scenes of a broadcast like this, of not getting my head into shot. So I'm having to do this from a much further distance away from my leaf than I might have liked. So there's some questions coming in. Kim is saying, love the way you think out loud. Things make more sense to help us beginners. Oh, I'm good. That's good. That's glad. Oh, for goodness sake. That's good. I'm glad. I've got words back to front today. Marion is saying, never mix watercolours and fluid acrylics wet in wet on the paper. Great effect. Do the granulating colours granulate the acrylics? No, they don't, but they do. You can still see them kind of underneath. So have an experiment, Marion, and you'll see that you get some very interesting effects. Quin Gold is not a colour that granulates, so we've got a kind of really rich version of the colour there. I'm really quite pleased with that, it has to be said. Nice and vibrant. It's going to need some detail at some point, but I don't actually think it needs a lot more than that, so leave well alone. And I'm actually going to dry that, so that I don't drop anything into it, I don't stick my hand in it or any of that kind of nonsense before I move on to the next one. Okay, that's not looking too shabby. Still a bit on the warm side, but it's dried really nicely. Very pleased with that indeed. So let's move on to this one, to that geranium leaf. So I think this is going to be predominantly green. That's going to have yellow on it as well. So maybe we go for green and brown with this one. But also, because I anticipated that that would be more pink, and it isn't. But, you know, this is how it goes. Who have I missed? Anne is saying, glad I'm here, as made me remember to sign up for my All Aboard Artist membership. All done now. Well done, Anne. And Stuart, good morning, Stuart. Is that a cold or a hot air dryer? So this is a heat gun, and it's the thing that I use for drying when I'm doing a broadcast. Why don't I use a hairdryer? It's not because this does anything any different. This is actually probably a little bit too hot for drying off bits of my painting, because let's fire it up and you can see the end of it. I don't know if can you see down in there, can you see it's glowing? It's incredibly hot indeed. It's meant for sort of melting things and for using with embossing powders and the like. This is probably a little bit too hot, so you'll see me waggle it around. Why do I use this and not a hairdryer? I use this because when it's switched on, it doesn't blow the speakers of my broadcast and I can still be talking over the top of it. So that is why I use it. It is, like I said, pretty hot, probably hotter than I would like it to be for a heat tool. If you've got a hairdryer and you're not broadcasting live over social media, then a hairdryer is absolutely fine. Stuart, I hope that answers the questions. The question for you. Good morning, Thyra. Lovely to have you here. Trudy is asking, would the inks dry differently naturally versus using the dryer? That's an excellent question. Yes, drying anything with a hairdryer does tend to suck some of the life out of the paint, particularly watercolour. So you do have to be careful with it, but you have to balance up. Do I want it to dry quickly versus how much colour is it going, how much shift is going to happen with the colour as I dry it. What you could do, Trudy, is you know me, you know what I'm going to tell you to do, don't you? Is to do a colour chart of lots of little colours and let them dry naturally. Cover that up, do the same colours in the same consistency, dry them with a heat gun, hairdryer, whatever it is that you have. Compare the two and see what happens, because I also bet that the paper has an effect on that too. Now I've got Milford paper for this project, which means that those colours are singing rather beautifully on the page. So, you know, that is another reason for using Milford. Now, what did I say I put on this? Green and brown, that's what I said I put on this. The sepia I'm not wild about as a colour. I think it's a bit on the kind of the dull side for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually mix it in with a little bit of that magenta so that I get a more pinky brown. So maybe that's a bit too pink actually. And this sepia is right on the verge of going off as well, as we discovered last week. So I'm really only using it for colour as opposed to using it for its consistency. Trudy is saying, that's a really good idea. I can feel the need for swatches coming on. You know me, Trudy, I love a swatch. Gotta love a swatch. Right, so there's my sort of pinky brown all ready to go. And now this has got a lot of serration. This is going to be quite the challenge to speak and paint at the same time, but let's give it a go. Now, because this is watercolour going down first, I don't actually need to put a patch of water down. I don't have to worry so much about there being a tide mark. And you know what? That brush is too big for that serration. So let's move to the size 2. It's going to take a bit longer to fill in with the size 2, but at least I won't have the same issue of getting it looking kind of like an interesting edge. Do like a bit of serration on a leaf, it has to be said. And let's add some water back into that so I can start to pull some of that colour away from the main tone and I can get variations on it. So this is terribly fiddly for me, isn't it? In my impressionistic usual style of painting. But I find more and more over the next few weeks that I'm kind of getting more interested in a bit more detail in my paintings. It's just the natural progression of things. So you might see some much more detailed stuff coming out of the studio in the next few weeks. It's going to be quite interesting, I think. Let's drop some water. Let's just drop some water in there, because in a minute I'm going to want to use that kind of lovely pinky brown, and I'm not entirely convinced I know where I want to use it yet. So let's buy ourselves some time by popping some water down. It's getting in here and moving this colour around. I don't want it like a rainbow. I don't want all green at the top and then, you know, all pinky brown underneath. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do about that yet, but let's keep painting. Always the answer to everything is to just keep on painting. I've got the deeper green going on in there, showing up nicely in the camera. You get a very nice kind of limey, very bright fluorescent green out of Green Apatite Genuine, which is why I've got that nice variegation going on there. And ooh, this is fiddly. I know I said I was more interested in detail at the moment, but this is super fiddly. Whilst I'm doing this, have I missed any comments from anybody at all? Pam is saying, I learnt my lesson when I used a hairdryer on high when the paper was wet, paint rivers all over the place. Yes, you do have to be a little bit careful that actually it doesn't physically blow the paint, unless of course that's something that you're interested in creating. So yes, I absolutely feel your pain, Pam. And Maureen is saying, good morning, lovely. Let's get a little bit more dark into there. I'm pushing my luck with this drying now because I'm in danger of getting a nasty old cauliflower in there, particularly if I put that much water on. That was a bit silly. Let's go into that reddy brown now and start to pop that back in. Now, am I pleased with that colour? Do I like that colour? I'm not entirely convinced I do like that colour. Let's add some more pink in with it. Can you tell I like the magenta? That's better. That's more what I had in mind. A sort of sludgy magenta is effectively what I was after. And we need to make sure that that's kept nice and wet. Going in down here. Maybe I do want some of that sludgy brown in with the green. Down in here. I'll tackle the stalk in a minute. Let's push some of that colour in and up and around. Let's get some more of the pink involved. Oh, hello. That's a bright old colour, isn't it? I'm not sure that I've ever seen a geranium leaf this colour. But hey-ho, it's my painting, my leaves, do what I like with it. And coming down into this serration, I think I need to push that pink up into there. Or maybe I need to bring the green down a little bit into other places. That's better, so it's deeper in the centre. Pulling that colour now. I really am pushing my luck now with the drying and getting a cauliflower. I've got slightly wetter paint kind of mixed in with paint that has dried on the surface. So I really understand. If you're shouting at your screen right now going, yes, but Ali, how are you getting away with that? Chances are I'm probably not going to get away with it. But do you know what? It'll be fine. What's the worst that can happen? Now, I need to smudge that a little bit into there. And I need to take care of the stem. I'm taking all the moisture away from my brush with my hand to do some smudging of colour so that I'm not adding any extra water back in. I think that will benefit from going that way. Yes, it does. That looks better, much, much better. Now, what colour do I want the stem? What colour do I want the stem? Let's go for the pinky sludgy brown thing. So let's take a little bit of that colour somewhere else on my palette and add some extra pink in with it. Maybe I've pushed that a little bit too far. And with my number 2 brush, let's put the green down, step away from the green, Ali. And let's pull that stem. This is really fine, this stem. Coming all the way down the page. And I can't talk and do fine work at the same time. There's a skill I didn't know I would have to acquire when I decided to be an artist. Let's get the end of that in. It's a little bit on the flat side. I'm not wild about that. So maybe I take some of that brown and we make that a much richer colour to get a shadow in at the top. Maybe that's better, so that there we go. So it's a little bit deeper at the top and a little bit paler on the ends. Good morning, Annette. You can be late to the party, that's never a problem. And then let's dry that one with the heat gun, and then we can move on to the last one. There we go. Marion is saying nothing wrong with cauliflowers. Yes, you're absolutely right. There are some artists that use cauliflowers back runs, they're called, where the paint pushes, where you've got wet paint pushing dry paint away. Got a lot of artists, Hazel Sohn being a good example, that use cauliflowers to their advantage. They just don't seem to work for me. So, you know, each to their own. Now we've got pink with quite a lot of gold kind of colour there. We've got green with a bit of pink. So I think now we need variations on yellow with a touch of green. And I know exactly the texture that I want for this because I'm looking at it out the window right now. So for this one, we've got a much smoother contour, so it should be easier to paint. And what's Diane saying? Loving the mix of inks and watercolours. Thank you. Thank you very much. Just hopefully broadening some horizons. If you've not tried this before, anything that's water soluble can get mixed together. So that can be acrylic, watercolour, whatever you like. So I'm going to make a nice puddle of sort of much paler yellow in here. I don't want it to be as rich as this. I want it to go down. I want it to be bright because otherwise it's going to look out of place. I'm probably going to need the green and I'm probably going to need the brown as well. But let's start with this one. So we're back to kind of traditional watercolour colours now, taking care of the moisture on my brush. And this is a much softer yellow, but we'll work on that in a second. We've got a hole in the leaf there, which I put in on purpose. Let's bring that colour down. So a sort of more, it looks very bright in the camera. It's not quite as bright in real life. I just kind of have the colour settings up to max when I do a broadcast so that you can see the colours nice and clearly. Let's get that in quite quickly. I think we can afford to be a bit stronger on the left-hand side of this leaf. Maybe over here to kind of mirror what's going on with the strength of this one. That's what I love about Quin Gold. You get these variations in it. Just such a great, great colour to be working with. And then let's pull some of that into paler versions, paler tones. And I think this is all still wet. This was another reason for working on Milford paper because you have much more time to blend colours on the surface on Milford. It has a very strong sizing on the surface, so it's going to stay wet into wet for far, far longer than perhaps other watercolour papers. So we'll get that in. And then what I want to do, because this is the texture I can see out of the window, I'm looking at it right now. So I'm going to take some of the green and wet into wet, I want to dot some kind of textured, some patterning so that I get a different look again from the other leaves. Here and there in places we'll have it where it joins up a little more. So we have some kind of bigger patches of green, but I wanted it to look interesting. You know, I wanted it to have, let's get some stronger colours, some really kind of quite dark dots. If you've got a pear tree in your garden and it's looking very similar to this, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Now we can make this green at the bottom down here. I don't like those brushstroke marks, so let's get rid of those. Working our way up into here, working our way the other side of that vein as well. I couldn't think what it was called then. Vein, so that we've got some kind of nice patterning going on. Let's get a little bit of the sludgy reddy brown thing. It's really technical, isn't it? Let's get a bit of that going in as well. So it almost looks kind of rust-like. That's what I wanted it to look like. I wanted it to look like it's got, you know, like well, leaves do get rust, don't they? A kind of a type of rust, a type of fungi, and that is coming together really beautifully now. Liking that. Do I want to do anything else to this? That is the $1 million question, isn't it? My faffing alarm, my little internal faffing alarm is already going off. You don't need to shout at me because I know it's going off. Whilst I'm just letting that dry off, I can catch up with the comments. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Anne. What's Rosemary saying? Autumn Watch last week explained that a green patch in an otherwise brown golden leaf means a caterpillar larvae is inside the leaf. Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you for that. That's really interesting. Like the thought of that. Like the thought of the fact that my garden is harbouring lots of larvae as well. And Mick said, raking up the autumn leaves, yellow, brown and red. And just when I thought I got them all, some landed on my head. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Right, let's get that green involved because we've got a yellowish stem. We've got a pinky brown stem. And then I think without further ado, we need to add a green stem in. So I'm taking the water off the ferrule on there and bringing that colour down into the stem. Coming all the way down into this ridiculously small space. Well, ridiculously small space for me. With the tiniest of brushes. My lovely friend Joy would be sniggering at me right now for the tininess of the brush. That's not a word, but it is today. And getting that kind of slanted finish in. And there we go. I think for the time being, that is as much as I want to do to it. It's a good basis of colour. We need to go back in and we need to add some extra detail into it. But I think for the time being, that works for me. So we've got combinations of our Dr. P.H. Martin Bombay inks and really good quality watercolours. So we've got the Quinn Gold and the Green Apatite Genuine in the Daniel Smith colours. And yes, they're working together. So we get the kind of vibrancy out of the ink. And we get that kind of lovely ability to be able to shift the colours between the watercolours. So for me, I think that works spectacularly well. I'm really pleased with that. I need to put it away and not to touch it anymore. Otherwise, I'm going to be in trouble, aren't I? Now, there's no Technique Tuesday next week. I'm not around next week. I'm travelling and doing lots of projects with art societies next week. So there's no TT next week, which means that we're back on the 15th of November. So if you're watching this in the present, on the 1st of November 2022, we will be back on the 15th of November. And I think what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing some detail work. I'm going to be going back in, looking at the veins, all of that kind of stuff. Now, don't forget that you can catch up with all of this on the Technique Tuesday blog on learningtopaint.co.uk, and there's an extra little bit of news on there as well to do with what is happening in 2023. But I'll let you make yourself a cup of coffee and go over and read that for yourselves. If you've joined me live this morning, thank you very much for taking the time and trouble to tune in. There have been lots of you in the room. Thank you very much for all the comments, and take lots of care of yourselves, won't you? Batten down the hatches if you're in the midst of the storm. I'm going to go and sort the chickens out. You take care, and I will see you very soon. All right, lovely people. Bye.